Good, thanks for joining for another episode of the Law Lounge. Today we'll be covering open play, players on the ground and offsides. Again, we take all our resources from main resource being the World Rugby laws of the game. So today we're covering on laws 10 and law 13. And we also take it from the definitions as well as the clarifications. We call out a clarification today in law to help us with one of the laws too. And we do have great website resources on our website too, so be sure to check out our laws page, education, and our intro to refereeing course as well, where it helps to break down all of our laws and officiating applications. So some key definitions for what we'll need to know today. Open play itself, so it's most of the game really. It's after kickoff, a restart kick, or any kick or penalty, or a set piece, and before the next phase. So it's all the in-between stuff that's not at a particular ruck or phase time or set piece play. It doesn't include when the ball's dead. So all the in-between time, any time that we don't have covered under other parts of law. So if we're talking about beyond or behind or in front of a position, we mean with both feet, except where the context makes it inappropriate. That's usually specified within a law. But we do mean both feet do need to be behind a position or in front of a position to be deemed in front of that. Hindmost. So hindmost means nearest a team's own goal line. And near, when we actually use the word near within law, we mean within 1 metre. Mean played or played at, that means the ball is played when it's intentionally touched by a player. So that's the key part there, is the intentional act of touching a ball. And off feet, again, players are off their feet when they're not supporting their weight. Basically, they're using anything other than just their feet to support themselves. Stand, so either the players on the ground or other parts of their body. Cool, so we'll start on players on the ground and open play. This is a really simple law. It's a very short law, probably the shortest, law 13. And it's, in fact, the principle of it actually just sums up everything that we cover. So the game is played only by players who are on their feet. If you think about that when applying this to any part of the game, then it makes the decisions pretty simple. All sanctions for players, for actions by players off their feet, will result in a penalty. First, we'll look at players on the ground with the ball. So any player who go to ground with the ball or to gather a ball on the ground, they've got to do one of a few things. So they've got to get up with the ball or play the ball, but not kick it. They can't kick the ball while they are on the ground. Or they have to release the ball. Those are one of the 3 actions that they need to take. So once the ball's played or released, they must either get up or move away from the ball as well. So they get to free up the ball for other people to play with the ball too. Demonstrate the video here.
Good tackling, 2-on-1.
So look to ground, players
get their hands on the ball, very organised out wide, and they will get the penalty.
There was no tackle, but they were holding the ball
committed to the ruck
ground.
there
So
by
they
Wales.
didn't fulfill their obligation to release
Shane
the ball.
Lewis Hughes, Adam Beard getting in, making them.
Cool. All right. Players on the ground without the ball. So this is for players who do not have the ball and they are on the ground. Basically, a player on the ground without the ball, they are out of the game. So they have to just let everyone else play as they want to play by their game possession. They cannot play the ball while they are on the ground, and they can't tackle anyone. Well demonstrated.
And that for Moshwalga and his coaching committee will be something that they will try and utilise.
You can see here, 15 white, who's still on the ground. Ball's popped back by blue. Plays the ball. Now, whilst he's not necessarily in offside position, I couldn't see there if offside lines were created. Offside lines were created anyway. But he's on the ground, playing the ball.
Advantage, play on the floor.
Ball is loose. Caulfield picks up the rebound, but the call was already made.
Okay, players on their feet. Pretty simple. Players on their feet without the ball must not fall on or over players on the ground who have the ball or near it. So the action you can take if you are on your feet is you can play the ball, you can pick up the ball, do whatever you like there. However, you can't fall on it or seal it off or fall on a player who has the ball on the ground.
Up to the left go the Irish. Big hit.
See this quite
That's just what you need when Coombs is coming at you. And now the kick get chased.
The kick put through. Green gone to ground with the ball. 12 blue coming in.
Bell goes in.
And then in the attempt to get the ball,
down on the ball,
loses their feet.
Ball is Dean.
And then they've actually fallen on the wrong side and stopped the ball from coming back.
Can't tackle them like that though. Fall on the player. That's just an area you've got to maintain your body weight. Done everything right.
Okay, that's all we have to cover for players on the ground. Don't forget, if there are any questions, be sure to pop them into the chat and we can cover them at the end as well and have a chat. So now we'll go into offsides and onsides and open play. Simple principle about this one is that the game is played by only players who are onside. The definition of offside, so it's a positional offence. If a player is offside, that means they can take no part in the game without being liable to sanction. So the word liable is quite important. It means that they open themselves up to the opportunity to be sanctioned, to be penalised. However, their actions and the context of the game really will dictate if they are or not, and that's where referee application comes in. And we'll talk a bit about that throughout the next little bit. So interfering with play, we'll cover interfering with play because it has a large bearing on whether players are offside or not. So players offside in open play if they're in front of a teammate who is carrying the ball or who last played it, and that last played it could mean a kick. So an offside player must not interfere with play. So interfering means either playing the ball, either tackling the ball carrier, or preventing the opposition from playing as they wish. So that's what we can consider to be material effect. So even though you may not necessarily be playing the ball or tackling the ball carrier, by being in an offside position, you could be preventing the opposition from playing as they wish, so forcing them into making different decisions, and that can be deemed as offside. And I'm going to show a fairly controversial clip for this one.
Who secures the ball and gets the last chance?
Oudenberg kicks off. Ball loose. Oh.
Red plays the ball. Red jumps for the ball.
Oudenberg kicks off.
It hits them and bounces across to a player who's in front of the red player who just played the ball. And that player catches the ball. So by definition, they have interfered with play, which because they are offside. So they're in front of a teammate who's last played it, and they cannot play the ball. They didn't drop the ball because they knew that they were guilty. That comes through and probably should have had advantage anyway and would have been through to score under the posts. This is a correct penalty. And then I think the rest is history after that. We won't dive into that one too much. The correct decision was made in the first instance. When is a player offside? So a player can be offside anywhere within the playing area. So a player in an offside position is liable to be penalised if they do any of these three things. Again, liable is the key word here. So to interfere with play, and we've just defined what interference can be. If they move forward towards the ball, okay, so that can be towards the ball. It has to be in a forwards direction. It doesn't necessarily mean sideways. Or if they're within 10 metres of where the ball pitches and do not retire. That's called the 10-metre law, and we're going to cover that in some depth very shortly. The sanction for any of these offences, so in open play, there's an option here for the non-offending team. So either they can choose the penalty, and that's at the place of the infringement itself, or they have a scrum where the offending team last played the ball. So for this option, the referee will normally put their arm up for the penalty. They'll then say to the captain, option, penalty, or scrum up where they last played it. Usually the scrum's typically only taken from if the infringement was from a kick. 10-metre law, we'll dive into this for a bit. It's quite an interesting one. So this applies at a kick and open play. If the player is in front of the kicker and within an imaginary line that runs across the field to 10 metres on that player's side from where the ball is caught or lands. So if you imagine where the ball comes down, either hit the ground or where it's caught, where a player plays it, then bring the line 10 metres forward from that. And that could be into the end goal, because you can be offside anywhere within the playing area. Then that's where that imaginary line comes through. So even if the ball hits the goalpost or a crossbar first, it's where it then comes down and lands after that, or is caught after that. So they are, again, liable to be penalised if they fail to retire. So the action of this player, they actually need to retire. They can't just stand there and wait. They have to get out of that 10-metre that 10-metre zone, or start to retire. And then if one of the onside teammates comes through, then they can be put on side. But the key thing is that they cannot sit there and wait. So if it involves more than one player, so there's more than one player that's in an offside position, then the player closest to where the ball lands or is caught is the one penalised. So again, the mark for the penalty would be where the nearest infringing player would be, but the mark for the option for the scrum would still be back where the player kicked it. The law applies, so it still applies if the ball touches or is played by an opponent, but not when a kick is charged down. So I'll just reiterate that one. So the 10-metre law, you're still offside if it hits an opponent, so if it touches an opponent, or it's played by an opponent, so they might be going to try and catch the ball, but they don't succeed. But the 10-metre law does no longer applies when the kick is charged down. And again, 10-metre law, the player can't be put on side by any action of any other player apart from a charge down. So we'll dive into this little bit of charging down for a second, because it has caused some confusion to the point where rugby unions have sought clarification from World Rugby on this. So charge down itself. So consider the situation. So a blue player attempts to charge down, and we see this quite a bit. They try and charge down a kick, but the ball only slightly deflects off their hands and continues downfield. So basically it carries on going behind them. They're not successful with the charge down. Like, the charge down doesn't go in front of them. It carries on behind them on the original trajectory from the kick, really. So and the teammate of theirs then catches the ball. The red player, so that's the kicking team, the red player is only standing 4 metres in front of where that blue player received the ball, and then moves forward towards the ball, so they didn't retire at all. So is that red player offside? So if we have a little think about law, we think, well, hang on, we go back to our 10-metre law. The player's offside. They can't be put on side by any action except for a charge down. So the only thing sticking out here was the charge down, or we don't really know, because the ball wasn't really charged down. It was kind of attempted charge but deflected and carried on. However, we do have some clarification on this. So in 2011, so there's no clear definition of a charge down in law, but there is clarification from 2011. The act of a charge down is where an opposition player not in possession approaches the kicker at close quarters and makes an attempt to block the kick. So that word attempt then now becomes pretty key. We now consider that an attempted charge down to be a charge down in terms of policing offside law. So once they attempt that charge down, if they do make contact, then all bets are off. Everyone's onside. Play as you wish. So the red player was put on side by the charge down, and play continues. Right, looking at unintentional offsides, and this is what that call on that video ended up being before, which is probably the incorrect call. anyway, we'll look at this. So a player who receives an unintentional throw forward is not offside. So again, that really relates to forward passes. So if a player passes to a teammate and that teammate's in front of him, but it's a forward pass, but he didn't really mean to throw, he wasn't intentionally trying to throw it forward, then they're not offside. It's just a forward pass, and scrum ensues. This law is in here really just to protect the game from turning into American football. Players accidentally offside if they can't avoid being touched by the ball or by a teammate who's carrying the ball, and only if the defending team gain an advantage should play stop. So you can be hit by the ball, and you can be hit by a teammate carrying the ball, but if you gain no advantage from that, if the opposition weren't disadvantaged by it, then there's no reason to stop the game. You can carry on. Show this clip.
Falau. Doesn't go anywhere. Goes back to Falau.
Well, an incredible playing the win, took that one. First one, didn't look like Lau. Didn't look like he really needed to do that, trying to drop it on.
And it hits his teammate in front of him. So it was a rubbish kick. His teammate in front of him is in an offside position, but couldn't avoid being hit by the ball. Therefore, we don't penalise that player.
Left foot, try to drop it onto the...
I'll go as far as saying as well. So this will be covered under our MAUL law chat. However, we do also treat offsides at the lineout. So for a team who sets up a MAUL at a lineout, if the other team does not engage with that MAUL, and the team who set up the MAUL shifts the ball to the back, the referee will ask them to use it. If they move forward and there's been no MAUL formed because the opposition hasn't engaged in that MAUL, and they have the ball at the back of the MAUL, that means that they have players in front. We don't treat that as an intentional offside, so not penalisable. We treat that as an unintentional offside, therefore a scrum. So again, that has come about because we don't want to discourage teams from setting up MAULs, which is positive play. So we will cover that slightly more in depth once we get to our MAUL law lounge. Offside player being put onside. So there's only 3 ways that players can be put onside. So that's by actions of their own, so things that they do, actions of teammates, and actions of their opponents. And they all look a little bit different. So we'll start with actions of their own. So any offside player, no matter what's going on in the game, if it's open play, any offside player can be put onside by their own actions. So that player has to either move behind the teammate who last played the ball, or moves behind a teammate who is onside. Note that they are making the action to move behind, which is, in other words, retire. So they're making that action and then getting onside there. Teammates, what their teammates can do. So their teammates can put them onside as well. However, they can't put them onside under the 10-metre law, apart from a charge down, but that's been covered. So if a teammate of that player moves past them, and then they have to be within the playing area as well. So if they run out and past the touchline and they're running up just past the touchline as well, they have to come back inside the field of play, or inside the playing area, to then put anyone onside. Okay, so we can see in the diagram here 3 ways, and these 3 examples of teammates putting other players onside. So player with the ball, so offside player runs behind the ball carrier, so he's now onside. Teammate with the ball runs ahead, so the offside player who's stationary is waiting there and now put onside. So a kick put in, offside players there, and onside players come from behind the kicker and run ahead of the teammate. This also applies for teams retreating 10 metres from a penalty or a free kick as well. So if players are retreating, they haven't got back 10 metres yet. If a player then who was 10 metres, or if a quick tap's taken, and a player who was 10 metres back now moves forward, then those players who are retreating can then be put onside by that player who's come from an onside position. So they might only make it 5 or 6 metres back, but then they're put onside by a player who was 10 metres run past them. That's that similar situation there, because once that quick tap's taken, then it's open play. So actions of the opposition. So other than under the 10-metre law and charge downs aside, the opposition can put a player onside by doing one of these 4 things. Okay. So if they get the ball and they run it 5 metres in any direction, they could be backwards, forwards, sideways. It doesn't matter which way they're running it. They run any of those directions 5 metres, and then they're putting any of those players onside. So that particularly rings true for kicks put downfield. Players who are in front of the kicker might be stopping and waiting. Opponent gathers the ball, runs 5 metres, then all those players who stopped and waited are now onside. Also, if the player passes the ball, they're then put onside, or if they kick the ball, they're then onside, or if they intentionally touch the ball without gaining possession. So that would be something like trying to catch the ball, but stuffing up the catch, and then the catch goes to ground. That means that those offside players are now put onside as well, so they can then move forward. Again, none of that applies to the 10-metre law. Cool. And our last piece, and then we'll jump into questions. I can see there's one on there. So retiring from RUCK, MAUL, scrum, and lineout. All right. So a player who is offside at a RUCK, MAUL, scrum, and lineout, but also a tackle where offside lines are formed as well. So that also needs to be read into here as well. So read that into RUCK. They remain offside even after it's ended. The only way they can be put onside is their own action, so they retire behind wherever their offside line was, or the opposition carries the ball 5 metres, or the opposition player kicks the ball. So this removes the two opposition ones that we had before, where they either pass the ball or intentionally play at it but drop it. No actions of teammates can put them onside in this case. But again, we will look at now when they're liable for sanction. So that player could be penalised if they fail to retire. So they can't just hang out in an offside position, particularly if they benefit from that. You'll put in a more advantageous position. So they can't just stay offside, and even though they're not interfering with play, they can't just hang out there because that's deemed to, I think, or if they do interfere with play, or if they move towards the ball. So I think Andre Watson in the early 2000s coined the phrase lazy running, which is a good one. So players who were retiring, interfering with play, and this was probably example of interfering with play.
Lays it up for Dupree.
Okay, so RUCK formed. So they have offside lines at the hindmost part of each team's participants, and then we have a retiring black player who's retiring right through the wrong area, and clearly didn't see the ball, or did, and interferes with play. Whether it was intentional or not is irrelevant. They've interfered with play. They're liable for sanction.
Kano was aware of the danger, and then coming in from an offside position, he's got to get behind the back feet of his mates in front of him.
For all of that is penalty at the applicable offside line.
Kano and Steve Hansen.
Cool. And lastly, with our NZR game priorities. So these are priorities that NZR put out to teams and referees to focus on. These are the 2020 community rugby priorities. So part of those includes space for the game to operate. So some of the priorities for this year, so maintaining the defensive lines at set piece. So we're looking at those scrums, those lineouts, maintaining those defensive offside lines, allowing the space for the game to play. Players in lineout remaining there until the lineout has ended. So thinking about those lineout offsides as well, which we've covered in the previous Law Lounge. So defenders having all parts of their body behind the offside line, so feet and hands, extremely important near the goal line, where you can gain a significant advantage by leaning forward and resting on your hands. So don't forget, if you are resting on your hands, you're actually, it's not your hands that are making you offside. It's the fact that you're now then a player on the ground, because you're supporting yourself with your hands on the ground. So you're off your feet. You can't take part in the game. You then need to move back to an onside position. So it's both feet behind the line. So either way, you're going to get penalised if you got your hands in front of the either way, you're going to get penalised. So players must stop when ahead of the kicker. It kicks in general play until they're put onside. Yeah, and then good question there, Perry. So it says stop. However, World Rugby law says retire. So we'll just flick back to our World Rugby law. So this game priority here is referring to kicks in general play. So this is referring to players who are in front of the kicker who aren't infringing the 10-metre law. So if you're not infringing the 10-metre law, so you're well away, so you're 15, 20 metres, whatever, away from where the ball lands, you can actually stay there. You don't have to retire. So those players must stop. They can't move forward. The only players within that 10 metres, those are the ones who must retire. So just flip back. Cool. There we go. So player in offside position is liable to penalise if they either interfere with play, move forward towards the ball, or are within 10 metres. So it's really that B that we're looking at. So because if they're not infringing that 10 metres, then they can actually stand still where they are in that offside position and wait for their teammates to pass them to be then put onside. So we're only really looking for them to retire. They must retire if they. We're talking about kicks here. They must only retire if they are within that imaginary line inside that 10 metres infringing there. Hopefully that makes sense. Just chuck it through if you want any further clarification on that. Cool. Right, and that is all we had today on our presentation. I'll just go. We've got a couple of other questions there. So. So question there, Perry. So I noticed that some club players are still crawling post tackle, even head coaches coaching it. Provide some clarity. I can definitely provide some clarity. So again, it's players off their feet. So it's we've got pretty clear definitions in both our players on the ground law and our RUCK law, or tackle law as well, and which we'll cover in depth on Thursday. But once you go to ground, either in a tackle or just go to ground or anything like that, that the ball carrier must release the ball and get away from it. They can't do any other action with that ball other than present it. Perhaps they can, wiggle their body in the position to try and present the ball. That's generally accepted. Particularly if they fall down on the wrong side, they might want to roll back and present it. That's generally okay. However, rolling forwards, as you suggest, does a couple of things. And it's something that's, I guess, a bit of a blight on the game, particularly in the last couple of years. I think we see these waves of law infringements where it'll sort of be built up, and then hammered down by World Rugby in officiating. I think right now, well, of course, last year there was a lot around high tackle contact. We're only yet to see what the next one would be. I can't imagine that this would be too far away. But basically, if they're rolling forwards, they're liable for sanction. It does a couple of things. One is that they're not fulfilling their obligations to release the ball and get up and move away from it. And two, that then puts the jackler or the offside team at a massive disadvantage, particularly if they had a player who arrived first getting over the ball to try and to be the first man over the ball, try and jackal the ball. And then that player rolls again. All of a sudden, that would-be jackler finds himself in an offside position. Which through no fault of his own, because the ball carrier didn't fulfil his obligations to release the ball. Because then that jackler has to go back around and join from and behind his teammates, back in through the gate, to then ready to play. So, again, it's not something I'd encourage coaching. If coaches are coaching it, then they're probably going to have to try and think about coaching something within the laws pretty soon. It's something that I don't, as a referee, we would, I can speak personally, and if I saw that happening in a game, then, probably first offence, I'd look at it and go, okay, did it have a real big material effect right there? Maybe just a verbal reminder or something to the team, and then penalty next time. Or if it had a big material effect on what so their action had a big effect on someone trying to get that ball. So again, it comes down to what effect did it have on the game. If it had a big material effect, then yes, you're probably going to see a penalty blind for it. But if there's no other player there and they're just gaining a little bit of extra ground, and no other person was really going to win that ball, then you're probably not. The referee's probably not going to ping that, other than just have a conversation with the captain or those players at the next stoppage. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Any other questions, guys? Cool. Well, thanks for joining. If you do have a question, Scott, I'm going to pop this up online. But yeah, we're going to cover tackles and rucks on Thursday. Again, we're recording all of these sessions, so if you can make it, you make it. You can't, you can't. But you can pop your questions through ahead of time if you can't make it. That's all good. I can cover those off. But yeah, thanks very much for that.